up, guys? It's Dom, and welcome back to another movie review. Today we are continuing our grind through the X-Men franchise with X-Men Days of Future Past. X-Men Days of Future Past, released in 2014, directed by Bryan Singer, the X-Men send Wolverine to the past in a desperate effort to change history and prevent an event that results in doom for both humans and mutants. Let's get right into the 10 essential aspects of a movie. The first essential aspect is plot. So I actually think that the plot of this movie is the best out of the X-Men franchise, simply because the idea is really cool of needing to go back to the past to save the future, but also that they thought of the little things like, yes, Wolverine is the only one that can physically make that trip because of his rapid healing. His brain would be strained if it was just a regular human or a mutant that doesn't have that healing factor that he does. So I'm glad that they did think of that. And it put an interesting spin on things because of the relationship that he had with Professor X in Days of Future Past, where they wanted to draft him into the X-Men and he told them to go F themselves. So I thought that was cool that he had to kind of rebuild that connection by going to the past. So I think that this plot in general was very well thought out, which made it for a much more interesting watch. The second essential aspect is attraction. I was entertained watching this movie basically the whole time. I actually liked Wolverine's comedy in this one, which was a big bonus, because in the Wolverine, he tried to be more comedic and it didn't work as well. But in this one, it actually worked. He actually was funny. He had subtle jokes that it seemed like he didn't even mean to make jokes, but the way he said it was actually pretty funny and it was entertaining. And also, the way that they showed the time travel is really cool to see, because in a split second, it changes from how it was to how it is now because of the events that have changed. And it's just like that in one frame. So it's really cool to watch. And in general, of course, it is superpowers. So it's always going to be entertaining to watch superheroes fight supervillains. That's just how it works. So yes, in general, this movie is very entertaining. The third essential aspect is theme. I mean, the theme is in the movie. Sometimes the only way to change the future is to change the past. That's really all they were going for here, and it fit well. The fourth essential aspect is dialogue. So the dialogue between all the characters was honestly pretty good because they already had previous connections. Whether it's from First Class, obviously the connections they built there, and then the only outsider was Wolverine traveling back. But the dialogue between them was still good because it was kind of butting heads the whole time. And especially when we're talking about butting heads, especially between Xavier and Magneto, they had a rough start in the movie because the last thing that the franchise ended off on was First Class, where at the end of the movie, they went against each other. So that's where this movie basically started, just a few years later. So I'm glad that they kept that same dialogue, chemistry, relationship that they had and started off the movie with them hating each other and arguing about it. So I thought the dialogue was honestly pretty good, but especially between Wolverine, Xavier, and Magneto, that was the prime dialogue. The fifth essential aspect is acting. So overall, I think the acting was pretty good, but especially by Hugh Jackman, he played Wolverine. He's always going to be good as Wolverine. He fits the character so well. He knows how to be Wolverine. So I don't even have to spend too much time about that. He always nails it. Michael Fassbender as Magneto, my favorite choice for Magneto, as I said in previous videos. I think he does a great job. I love how he plays the character. James McAvoy as Xavier, and I do like him. Obviously, Patrick Stewart looks more like Professor X. But as a de-aged, younger version of Professor X, I think he does a great job because it's before he really tapped into his full potential of his powers and accepted how he's supposed to use them instead of being such a jokey, almost frat boy-esque. So I think he did honestly a really good job. And Jennifer Lawrence as Mystique, she's my favorite pick out of the ones that we've had. So I think they did a great job overall. The acting was awesome. The sixth essential aspect is cinematography. So obviously the most cinematic scenes were towards the end of the movie where they made a good choice of how to play out that scene to express as much emotion as they could because you really didn't know it was going to happen. But I think the most cinematic scene that they had was actually Quicksilver when he was breaking out Magneto from the Pentagon. I loved that scene. It wasn't as realistic as it could have been, but I saw past it. I really didn't care. That scene was awesome when you can see how fast he really moves because everything just stops around him, or the bullets move so slowly you can't even see them move. So that scene is awesome when he's running around the kitchen, messing with people. The only reason I say it's not really realistic is because I feel like if he pushed a fist into someone's face at the speed he was going, how it would either not do anything at all, or his head would start spinning. That's how hard he would get hit. Because if he's moving who knows how much faster than a speeding bullet, I think him doing that little motion with a fist would do I would personally think it would do a lot of damage. But since he moved it so slowly and it just like stopped it in place, it could have just not done anything. I feel like it shouldn't have done what it did in the movie, which was just a regular punch. But I really did just see past that because that scene looked awesome. The music playing in the background, which I thought was cool to think about how since he's listening to it in his speed, it's got to be like times 10,000 speed for music playing. And I enjoyed that. That was definitely one of my favorite scenes in the movie. Probably why I like this movie so much, because of that character. The seventh essential aspect is editing. So Days of Future Past is 2 hours and 12 minutes. And honestly, I like that length. Anything over 2 hours can feel a little long sometimes, but I think there was enough story to really make it worthwhile. I mean, they don't just have the stuff in the past, but they have the events in the future, all versions of them. They have the version before Wolverine got sent, after he came back, and then anything in between. So I think that it does a good job wrapping up so many story points because it has to focus on so many, and you can't really show a movie that makes you split focus while watching it. So they did a good job connecting all the pieces and making it flow well within that time frame. So honestly, I think it should be right where it is. Obviously, it could be shorter because easier watches is always with shorter time, but I personally believe it's right where it needs to be. The eighth essential aspect is soundtrack. So obviously the soundtrack, I don't really remember it much other than the intro credits, of course, like in all the X-Men movies, that classic music. But of course, I want to shout out again, when Quicksilver was listening to that tune, it fit the scene perfectly. So I really can't complain about the soundtrack. Even that little bit is pretty good to me. The ninth essential aspect is directing. So the director of this movie is Bryan Singer, and it was his job to take these previous 8 essential aspects, put them together to make a movie that's worth watching. And I think he nailed it. I mean, this is my favorite X-Men movie, so I don't want him to change a thing. I think he did phenomenal. And he had experience because he has done 8 previous movies, and they were Public Access, The Usual Suspects, Apt Pupil, X-Men, X2, Superman Returns, Valkyrie, and Jack the Giant Slayer. And I have watched some of those movies, not the earlier ones he's done, but of course the X-Men movies, which I have reviewed on this channel. Definitely go check them out if you haven't already. But I have reviewed those X-Men movies, and I know exactly where I stand on those, and I definitely think these are better. But again, for me, a lot of the time, the X-Men movies are improving, other than Last Stand. That one kind of really dropped. But I think that they do improve slowly and surely up to this point, and this one is my favorite. So I think he did a great job, and I'm glad how he did this movie. And the 10th essential aspect is time. As of the recording of this video, this movie is 10 years old, and it clearly stands the test of time, at least for me. I mean, it's my favorite X-Men movie, even if it wasn't part of that franchise, one of the bigger movie franchises. I still think it would be such an amazing movie. Even if there was no context for what happened beforehand, just the story itself of this movie is so engaging. The characters you love the characters. Obviously, they're superheroes. You want them to complete the mission. You want them to go save the future by going into the past. And you're constantly interested in the premise of this movie. So I think, yes, it definitely stands the test of time, even if it was a standalone movie. Now, onto the reviews. So the critics actually rated this where I would rate it, for the most part. I mean, Rotten Tomatoes critics gave it a 90%. Rotten Tomatoes audience gave it a 91%, and IMDb gave it a 79%. And I am going to have to agree with the Rotten Tomatoes critics. I think it deserves a 9 out of 10. I love this movie. It will be my favorite X-Men movie for a while. It's one of my favorite Marvel movies in general, So I definitely think it deserves a 90%, and that's out of a lot of movies that exist. So I think that Bryan Singer should be proud that he directed this film because it is awesome. And finally, the rankings. Where will X-Men Days of Future Past rank in its year, decade, and in all time? Let's find out. Starting with 2014, it's going to rank first overall since it's the only movie I have reviewed in that time. And in the 2010s, it will rank second underneath Inside Out and above Megamind. I think Megamind is an amazing movie. I love the story. I love the characters. I just think X-Men Days of Future Past has a little bit more of everything. I like the story a little more. The premise is a lot more interesting, honestly, to me. And the characters are probably on par. There's just more characters in X-Men Days of Future Past than Megamind. So there's more characters to love. So that's really what really had to nitpick here, and I think that's really what won me over is the amount of characters that you are actually interested in Days of Future Past is more than Megamind, and the story is a little bit better. So that's why it's above that. And the only reason it's under Inside Out, honestly, because you love the characters in Inside Out, but I think the premise and how the story goes is a lot more interesting than a lot of movies. I love the thought of making a movie that has to do with the emotions in your head and how they shape your life. I think that's a really cool idea, and that's why Inside Out's number one for me all time. So I don't think I even have to say too much more. Inside Out is clearly better, for me at least. And let's move on to all time, where will be a similar situation because it will also rank second, with Inside Out being above it and Megamind below it. So I'm not even going to waste any more of your guys' time because I just explained why it's in that second position. So that's all I have for X-Men Days of Future Past. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and make sure to comment what movie you want me to review next. I hope you guys have a great day. Peace out.